Number 5.
In September of 1961, a couple from New Hampshire by the name of Betty and Barney Hill claimed to have been abducted by aliens. The two had embarked on a vacation in Canada. On September 19th, they began their journey back home. At about 10 p.m., Barney, who was driving, saw a star which seemed to be moving erratically. He told Betty about it, and they both kept tabs on it as they drove along. They were just north of Woodstock when Barney noticed that the star was moving in a very unusual manner. When they arrived at Indian Head, they stopped their car and got out to have a better look. Using binoculars, Barney zoomed in on what he thought was a star. He could make out different colors of lights and see several windows around the flying craft. The object was moving closer, and now Barney could actually see people inside the ship. The next thing the Hills recalled was being frightened by the unusual flying object and the occupants inside of it. Barney ran back to the car where Betty was waiting. He jumped inside and raced down the highway, looking for the object. They found out now that it was gone. Although they had only been driving for a couple of minutes, they were already 35 miles down the road. Betty and Barney finally arrived home safely after seeing the UFO. The rest of their trip home had been pretty uneventful. They were tired from their journey and immediately went to bed. Betty awoke the next day. She telephoned Janet, her sister, and told her about the strange object they had seen. Janet urged her to call the local Air Force base and tell them what her and Barney had seen. After hearing Betty's report, Major Paul W. Henderson told her the UFO was also confirmed by our radar. At least the Hills weren't seeing things, and they were trying to put the incident behind them. But soon, Betty began to have nightmares, and in her dreams she would see her husband being physically forced into some type of craft. Before long, 2 writers heard about the Hills story and contacted them. The Hills, with the aid of the writers, compiled a time chart of the events of September 19th. There was no doubt that the couple had lost 2 hours of their time somewhere along the way, but they can't figure out how.
Number 4.
On January 6, 1976, Mona Stafford, Louise Smith, and Elaine Thomas would have a terrifying experience with a UFO and possible alien beings. The added strength of a well-conducted investigation makes this one of the most quoted events in UFO cases worldwide. This report would not only include an abduction, but other validating sightings, physical evidence, animal reaction, and electromagnetic effects. Not only was this case fully reported and researched, it was followed up upon, determining the long-range effects on the health and lives of these 3 well-regarded women. On January 6 was Mona Stafford's 36th birthday. She was joined by her best friend Louise and Elaine to celebrate the event, and just get together and have a friendly dinner. The 3 good friends took their dinner plans to the Redwood Restaurant, which was located south of Lancaster, Kentucky on US 27, 35 miles from their hometown of Liberty. As the 3 finished their dinner, they started out on what they thought would have been a nice, pleasant drive back to their houses. And little did they know what would lie in store for them, and what would be a night they would never and could never forget. They left Redwood Eatery around 11:15. The 3 women were in a good mood, as Louise Smith sat behind the wheel of her 1967 Chevy Nova. It should be noted that none of the 3 had any beer or liquor to drink that night. Leaving Stafford and heading for Hudsonville on Highway 78, the 3 suddenly see a bright red object in the clear night sky. The sighting frightened Mona, who thought it was an airplane on fire and heading for a crash landing. As the glowing object came closer, Smith lost control of the car. The little Chevy was now going 85 miles an hour, a speed never traveled before by Smith. In a panic, she cries, "I can't hold the car on the road." Mona reaches over and tries to help her, thinking that something was wrong with the steering, but she can't control it either. The car continued its high rate of speed, without deviation. Later, Louise would state, "My foot wasn't even on the gas pedal." In a moment, the unknown object was frighteningly close to the Chevy. It followed from behind the car for a short period of time, then flipped on its end, coming extremely close to the driver's side. All 3 women would later recall the same thing. What they were looking at was an enormous metallic round-shaped object with a dome on top, and a ring of red lights around its midsection. The women all saw it close enough to see a yellow blinking light on its underbelly. The UFO hung over the driver's side of the car before it moved ahead of it on the highway. As it did, a bluish-white light shot into the car, lighting up the interior of the vehicle. Later, Miss Smith would describe the inside of her car being filled with a haze-like air, sort of like a fog. In a second, all 3 of the women suffered from a burning sensation, so strong that they couldn't open their eyes because they were so irritated. The last thing in the memory of Smith, Stafford, and Thomas was being backed into the pasture entrance in a crazy manner. The entry was flanked on both sides by an old stone wall. 1 hour and 20 minutes later, the three found themselves back in the little Chevy, again driving toward Liberty. They were shaken and tense, with exposed areas of flesh, painful from the burns. The three frightened and scared ladies finally arrived at Mrs. Smith's home, and when they entered, they noticed that the clock in the kitchen showed 1:20 a.m., confirming that the trip of 35 miles had just taken over 2 hours. Normally it took about 45 minutes. They immediately went to their neighbor's house, who also confirmed the time loss. Confused as to what to do next, they called the police station. The next day they phoned the Navy recruiting station. Neither of the two calls offered them any aid. The Navy station did give some of the details of the event to a local Lexington TV station. The story quickly reached the press and was given a headline status.
Number 3.
May 11th, 1950, Evelyn Trent was walking back to her farmhouse after feeding her animals on the farm. Miss Trent and her husband Paul lived on a farm approximately 9 miles from McMinnville. Before reaching the house, she claimed to see a slow-moving, metallic, disc-shaped object heading in her direction from the northeast. She yelled for her husband, who was inside the house. Upon leaving the house, he claimed to have also seen the object. After a short period of time, he went back into their home and obtained a camera. He managed to take a few photos of the object before it sped away to the west. Paul Trent's father claimed he briefly viewed the object before it flew away. The photos were reprinted in Life magazine and in newspapers across the nation, and are often considered to be the most famous ever taken of a UFO. The photos, however, are surrounded in controversy, with many UFO researchers claiming they show a genuine, unidentified object in the sky, while many other UFO skeptics claim that these photos are just a hoax.
Number 2.
In July of 1947, an unidentified object crashed into a rancher's field. A rancher by the name of Mac Brazel said later he found debris from the crash as he and the son of Floyd and Loretta Proctor rode their horses out to check on the sheep after the fierce thunderstorm the night before. Brazel said as they rode along, he began to notice unusual pieces of what seemed to be metal debris scattered over a large area. Upon further inspection, he said he saw a shallow trench several hundred feet long and had been gouged into the ground. Brazel said he was struck by some unusual pieces of debris, and after dragging large pieces of it into his shed, he took some of it over to show the Proctors. Miss Proctor, who later moved from the ranch to a house closer to town, said she remembers Brazel showing up with the strange material. The Proctors told Brazel he might be holding the wreckage from an alien spacecraft. A number of UFO sightings had been reported in the United States that summer, where they said it could be a government project, and that he should report the incident to the local county sheriff. A day or two later, Brazel drove into Roswell, New Mexico, and reported the incident, who reported it to Jesse Marcel, an intelligence officer from the 509th Bomb Group, stationed at Roswell Army Airfield. In their book, A History of UFO Crashes, UFO researchers Don Schmidt and Kevin Randall say their research shows a military radar had been tracking some unidentified object flying in the skies over southern New Mexico for about 4 days. On the night of July 4th, 1947, radar indicated the object had gone down about 30 to 40 miles north of Roswell. The book says eyewitnesses William Woody, who lived east of Roswell, said he remembered being outside with his father the night of July 4th, 1947, when he saw a large object plunge to the ground. The debris site was closed for several days while the wreckage was cleared, and Schmidt and Randall say that when Woody and his father tried to locate the area of the crash that they had seen before, Woody said that they were stopped by military personnel who ordered them out of the area. Today, the U.S. government claims that the incident was nothing more than an Air Force surveillance balloon crash. However, many people just claim that that's a cover-up for something more serious, and most are convinced that it had something to do with the extraterrestrial. And today, Roswell, New Mexico continues to be one of the biggest tourist destinations for those curious about UFOs and aliens.
Number 1.
One of the most famous and reported incidents happened on March 13, 1997, which most people know as the Phoenix Lights. Lights of varying descriptions were reported by thousands of people that night, between 7:30 p.m. and 10:30 p.m. Mountain Standard Time, in a space of over 400 kilometers from the Nevada line through Phoenix and even on the edge of Tucson, Arizona. There were allegedly two distinctive events involving the incident: a triangular formation of lights seen passing over the state, and a series of stationary lights seen in the Phoenix area. The United States Air Force later identified the second group of lights as flares dropped by an A-10 Warhog aircraft that were doing training exercises at the Berry Goldwater Range in southwest Arizona. Witnesses claim to have seen a huge V-shaped object, several football fields in size, coherently moving. It was so big that stars would disappear behind the object and reappear as it passed by. It was producing no sound and contained 5 spherical lights, or possibly light-emitting engines. Fife Symington, the governor at the time, was one of the witnesses to the incident. As governor, he ridiculed the idea of alien origin, but several years later, he called the lights he saw that night otherworldly, after admitting he saw a similar UFO. Not only were the Phoenix lights one of the most mass-reported, unexplained, extraterrestrial event, with over 1,000 people claiming to have seen them, and hundreds of 911 calls reporting the lights to the police that night, it's also one of the most recent credible event with unearthly objects, with some people claiming to have seen these lights appear again in 2007 and 2008 around the same area they did before.